Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. So, if you've ever lived in an apartment building, you absolutely know the universal struggle, right? Other people. Or, more specifically, the noise those other people make. But if you happen to live in Switzerland, or maybe you're planning a move there, you are entering a culture that takes peace and quiet to an entirely new, heavily regulated level. Today, we're opening up the definitive guide to Swiss neighborly harmony. We're going to pull apart the rules, the exceptions, and the unwritten codes of conduct so you can navigate this whole landscape without starting a turf war in your stairwell.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The legal landscape. 2. Official Swiss quiet hours. 3. What is noise nuisance? 4. Keeping the peace. And 5. Handling noisy neighbors.
All right, starting with Section 1, the legal landscape, a patchwork of rules. Now, we so often hear about how strictly regulated Switzerland is, so you might naturally expect to find this massive, singular federal law titled something like the National Silence Act. But instead, the rules are highly decentralized. It's actually a lot like a giant puzzle. The noise regulations you have to follow live in a patchwork of local documents. So, if you own an apartment, they're in the regulations of the Condominium Owners Association. If you rent, they're strictly bound right into your building's house rules. And then zooming out just a bit, they're also dictated by the overarching Swiss Civil Code, alongside very specific policing and communal regulations for your particular town. So what does this all mean? It means the rules that apply to you depend heavily on exactly where you live and the specific building you are standing in.
Moving on to Section 2. Official Swiss quiet hours, the clock.
Now that we know where the rules come from, let's look at the actual time frame where they come into play. Look, we all perceive noise differently, right? But the Swiss clock tries to bring everyone onto the exact same page. While local rules can vary slightly, this timeline represents the standard daily cycle across most of Switzerland. The nighttime rest period begins sharply at 10 p.m. and ends at 6 a.m. But notice the middle of the day there. There is also an additional lunchtime rest period between 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. During these highly protected blocks of time, the absolute golden rule is that noises, whether you're talking on the phone, watching TV, or listening to music, cannot exceed standard room volume. Basically, if it bleeds through the walls, it's too loud. Having said that, communal regulations can occasionally offer slight tweaks to this rigid standard. For instance, in the city of Zurich, during the summer months, the nighttime quiet period begins 1 hour later. It kicks off at 11 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. It's a nice, localized nod to enjoying those warm summer weekends, but it highlights exactly why you need to check your specific communal rules.
However, do not let that summer exception fool you into thinking the weekends are some kind of free-for-all. Sundays and public holidays are considered quiet periods all day. Let me stress that firmly. From the moment you wake up on a Sunday to the moment you go to sleep, the entire typical weekend rest day is protected by quiet time rules, the whole shebang.
All right, Section 3. What is noise nuisance?
We have to acknowledge the subjectivity of sound here. What acts as soothing white noise for one person might literally stop someone else from getting a wink of sleep. So, how does a decentralized legal system actually attempt to define this? Well, Article 684 of the Swiss Civil Code relies on the concept of excess detrimental influence. There's no strict decibel limit written into this federal code. Instead, it relies on the basic principle that exercising your own rights just shouldn't harm your neighbor's property experience. And this brilliantly illustrates how the Swiss anchor the highly subjective feeling of annoyance into actionable legal text.
To really put into perspective how seriously the Swiss take this, just look at the company Noise Keeps in that same legal clause. The law forbids unjustified harmful effects, and it groups noise right alongside intense physical violations. We're talking severe vibrations, air pollution, noxious vapors, radiation, and even depriving your neighbor of sunlight. So when you blast your stereo at 11 p.m., legally speaking, it is treated with the same conceptual gravity as venting toxic gas into the hallway. Which brings us to Section 4, keeping the peace, practical application.
I know that sounds incredibly intense. So what do these abstract legal definitions actually mean for your daily routine and chores? Let's pose a highly relatable, specific question. You work all week, you're super busy on Saturday, you wake up on Sunday morning, and the carpets are a total mess. May I vacuum on a Sunday?
The answer is a definitive, unapologetic no. Even if your specific house rules don't explicitly ban the exact brand of vacuum you own, the overarching principle is that no loud work in or around the house is allowed during quiet periods. And remember what we said earlier, Sunday is a quiet period all day.
And this applies to a whole host of typical weekend chores.
Drilling, hammering, mowing the lawn, and vacuuming are strictly off-limits on Sundays, public holidays, and during those lunchtime and nighttime quiet periods. To maintain neighborly harmony, you absolutely must shift these chores to Saturdays or squeeze them in during regular weekday hours.
So the crucial point here is really about common sense and cultural expectations. Sometimes noise is completely unavoidable, right? Like having tradespeople working in your home. Other times it's totally planned, like hosting a dinner party. In either scenario, the cultural expectation in Switzerland is that you act proactively. Always warn your neighbors in advance. Just leaving a polite note in the hallway proving you are aware of the rules is a real game changer. It goes a long way toward ensuring your neighbors tolerate the temporary disruption.
And finally, Section 5, handling noisy neighbors, conflict resolution. But what happens when the shoe is on the other foot? If someone else crosses the line and disrupts your peace, there's a very clear escalation ladder you should follow. Step 1. Talk to them directly. Honestly, most people just don't realize how loudly their footsteps echo, and a friendly chat often solves it. Step 2. If it continues, start logging the noise accurately with dates and times, and contact your property manager to intervene. Step 3. If it's an immediate, severe violation, say a raging party at 2 a.m., then you can escalate to calling the police.
Now, what's really interesting is what actually happens when you reach the top of that ladder. If you complain to the property manager about regular, excessive noise and they fail to fix it, that noise is considered a fault of the property itself. That means you can legally request a rent reduction. Now, if you call the police, they'll come out to issue a warning to quiet down for the night. Actually, scratch that. It's just a warning. They cannot issue immediate fines on the spot without you filing a formal official report. Because these disputes can quickly spiral into serious legal territory, experts highly recommend having legal protection insurance to cover potential financial consequences. Calling the police rarely solves a bad neighbor dynamic in the long term, but holding management accountable financially, that often does the trick.
Ultimately, the Swiss system provides incredible clarity on exactly when you deserve silence and gives you clear avenues to enforce it. But I want to leave you with a final thought to reflect on as we wrap up this explainer. Does strictly regulating our quiet time with exact hours and legal definitions actually make us better, more respectful neighbors? Or does it somehow condition us to become less tolerant of the normal, everyday sounds of human life happening around us? It is a truly fascinating balance between community peace and individual freedom. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Swiss noise regulations. Keep those vacuums unplugged on Sundays, and I'll catch you next time.